Little black girl went to the police and said, "Come quickly to my house." The truth leaves everyone in tears. Officer David Thompson almost choked on his coffee when he saw the scene through the station window. A little black girl of about 8 was running desperately down the sidewalk, her braids flying in the wind, tears streaming down her face. She stopped right in front of the entrance, gasping for breath, and screamed at the top of her little lungs. "Please, someone help me. I need a police officer now." David rushed out, his 23 years on the Richmond police force never having prepared him for a situation like this. The girl ran up to him, grabbed his uniform with her trembling little hands, and looked directly into his eyes with an intensity that made him shudder. "Officer, you need to come to my house right now. It's urgent." "Calm down, little girl. What's your name?" David knelt down, trying to convey calmness. "Zoe. Zoe Williams. I live on Maple Street, number 127. Her voice was broken, but there was a strange determination in those words. "My grandmother always said that when something very bad happens, we should call the police. And now it has happened." David frowned. Something about the girl's demeanor intrigued him. Despite her obvious distress, she spoke with a clarity that was impressive for someone so young. It was as if she already knew exactly what to do. "Zoe, what happened at home? Is anyone hurt?" The girl hesitated for a second, her large expressive eyes filling with tears again. "My mom. She can't move properly anymore. And there are men at the house saying horrible things to her. They're being very mean." David's heart raced. A domestic situation with possible violence. He immediately turned on the radio and called for backup, but something about Zoe's behavior continued to bother him. She didn't just seem scared, she seemed prepared. "Are these men known to your family?" "One of them is." Zoe's voice grew lower, almost a whisper. "He's always been mean to Mom, but today he's worse. Much worse. And there are other men with him." As they walked quickly toward the police car, David noticed how Zoe held her posture straight, as if carrying an invisible weight on her small shoulders. At 8 years old, this girl had already seen things most children didn't even know existed. "Zoe, you were very brave to come here. Does your mother know you left the house?" A sad smile crossed the girl's face. "She taught me that sometimes you have to be brave even when you're really scared. And that good people always show up to help when you need them most." David turned on the siren and sped through the streets of Richmond. During the 5-minute drive, he watched in the rearview mirror as Zoe remained calm, staring out the window with an expression that mixed sadness and something he couldn't quite decipher. When they reached Maple Street, a simple, well-kept yellow house stood out in the middle of a neighborhood that had seen better days. Everything looked normal from the outside, but David knew that the worst tragedies usually happen behind closed doors. "That's the one," Zoe pointed with her little finger. "The yellow house with flowers in the window." David parked and looked at the girl through the rearview mirror. There was something in those eyes that disturbed him deeply, a premature wisdom that no child should possess. "Zoe, before we go in, I need you to tell me the truth. Are you absolutely sure you need my help?" The girl stared at him with impressive seriousness. "Mr. David, my mother always told me that there are moments in life when you have to choose between keeping quiet or telling the truth, even if it hurts a lot. Today is one of those days. If you feel that this story will touch your heart in a way you didn't expect, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because what Zoe was about to reveal inside that yellow house would change the lives of everyone involved forever, in a way that even the experienced Officer Thompson could not have imagined." When David and Zoe approached the yellow house, a heavy silence hung in the air. The curtains were closed, but muffled male voices could be heard through the windows. David instinctively reached for his radio, but Zoe held him back by the arm. "Mr. David, before we go in, I need to tell you something important." Her large eyes fixed on his with disturbing intensity. "My mother isn't sick in the normal way. She has an illness that makes her very weak at times, and today she couldn't get out of bed." David knelt down again, realizing there was much more to this story. "Zoe, who are these men at your house?" "The main one is Mr. Mitchell. He owns our house and about 20 others in the neighborhood." Zoe's voice grew lower, laden with a contained anger impressive for someone so young. "He always comes here when he knows Mom is feeling sick because he knows she can't fight back." David's heart sank. An abusive landlord taking advantage of a vulnerable tenant. He had seen this situation dozens of times before, but never involving such a young and seemingly well-adjusted child. What about the other men? 2 are his security guards. Big, scary men who just stand there while he yells at Mom. Zoe took a deep breath, as if preparing to reveal something even worse. But there's something they don't know, Mr. David. What is it, little one? A small, mysterious smile appeared on Zoe's face. Mom may be weak in the body, but her mind works perfectly. And she taught me a lot about how bad people behave when they think no one is paying attention. David felt a chill. There was something about the way Zoe spoke that made him think of a worldly adult, not an 8-year-old child. It was as if she had already seen and learned things that most people would take decades to understand. Zoe, did your mother ask you to come get the police? Not exactly. The girl looked at the house, where the voices were getting louder. She always told me that if Mr. Mitchell ever went too far, I should be brave and get help. This morning, when he came home with those men, I saw in my mom's eyes that today was that day. David discreetly radioed for backup, but kept his focus on Zoe. There were layers to this situation that he couldn't yet fully comprehend. How did you know you'd find a police officer at the station? I didn't. Zoe's answer surprised him. I just knew I had to try. Mom always says that when you're scared but you have to do the right thing, the universe conspires to help you. At that moment, the front door swung open. A tall, burly man wearing an expensive suit but with an unfriendly expression appeared in the doorway. His eyes narrowed when he saw David. Officer, may I ask what you're doing on my property? David stood up slowly, keeping Zoe behind him. Mr. Mitchell, I presume? I received a call about a situation that requires verification. Mitchell laughed, but it was a cold, unpleasant sound. Situation? The only situation here is a tenant who owes 3 months' rent and is trying to buy time with drama. That's not true. Zoe shouted, stepping out from behind David. Mom paid the rent at the bank yesterday. I was with her. Mitchell's face twisted in anger. That girl is a liar, just like her mother. Officer, I suggest you leave before this becomes a legal problem. David watched the dynamic with growing concern. Mitchell clearly hadn't expected Zoe to bring the police, and his arrogance was being replaced by something that looked like nervousness. Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to need to speak with Mrs. Williams and verify the situation personally. She's indisposed. She can't have visitors. That's when Zoe did something that took both David and Mitchell completely by surprise. She took a small cell phone out of her pocket, a simple but functional model, and showed the screen to David. Mr. David, yesterday I recorded a video of Mom paying the rent at the bank. She always taught me to keep proof when adults lie. Her eyes flashed with fierce determination. And I have more recordings too. Mitchell's face paled visibly. He stared at Zoe's cell phone as if he were looking at a poisonous snake. Where did you get this phone? His voice came out strangled. Mom saved up for months to get it for my birthday. She said every girl needs a way to call for help when she's in danger. Zoe held the phone tightly. And she taught me to always record important conversations. David realized that the situation had completely changed. This was not a defenseless child. This was a girl who had been carefully prepared by an intelligent mother to deal with exactly this kind of situation. Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to need to come inside now. And I'd very much like to see those recordings, Zoe. Mitchell took a step back, his face sweating despite the mild weather. That's invasion of privacy. A child can't record adults without permission. Zoe looked directly at him, without fear. Mr. Mitchell, Mom taught me about the law too. When someone is doing something wrong in our own home, we have the right to protect ourselves. At that moment, David realized that he had completely underestimated both Zoe and her mother. This was not a family of helpless victims. This was a family that had strategically prepared for this confrontation. As Mitchell desperately tried to prevent David from entering the house, Zoe whispered something that made the officer realize that what he was about to discover would change everything. Mr. David, what's on that phone isn't just about the rent. It's about much worse things he's done to other families. Mom taught me that sometimes a little person has to be brave to protect a lot of people. David pushed Mitchell aside and entered the house, closely followed by Zoe. What he found inside took him completely by surprise. He had expected to find a fragile, defenseless woman, but Deborah Williams sat calmly in the living room, organizing a stack of documents on the coffee table as if she were conducting a business meeting. "Officer Thompson," she said in a firm, polite voice, "thank you for responding to my daughter's call. I imagine Mr. Mitchell has already tried to convince you that we are just troublesome tenants." Deborah looked nothing like the vulnerable woman David had imagined. Although she was visibly physically debilitated, supported by pillows and with a blanket over her legs, his eyes sparkled with sharp intelligence and unwavering determination. "Mom, I showed Mr. David the cell phone," Zoe said, running to her mother's side. "And I told him about the recordings." Mitchell burst through the door, clearly agitated. "Deborah, this has gone too far. You can't teach your daughter to spy on adults. This is legal," Deborah interrupted calmly. "It's perfectly legal to record conversations in my own home, especially when someone comes in here making threats." David watched the dynamic with growing interest. Mitchell, who minutes ago had been brimming with arrogance, now looked genuinely concerned. And Deborah, far from being a helpless victim, spoke like someone who knew her rights very well. "Mrs. Williams, your daughter mentioned that she has important recordings. Could you explain the situation to me?" Deborah smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Officer Thompson, I've worked as a legal assistant at a law firm for 15 years. I may not have a law degree, but I've learned a lot about how people like Mr. Mitchell operate." Mitchell's face paled even more. "You never mentioned that you worked with lawyers." "You never asked me about my profession," Deborah replied sharply. "You always assumed I was just another vulnerable black woman you could intimidate with impunity." Zoe climbed onto the couch next to her mother and opened her cell phone. "Mr. David, would you like to hear last night's recording? When Mr. Mitchell came here with those men and said very ugly things to Mom." "Zoe, honey, let's start with something simpler," Deborah said, taking the phone from her daughter. "Officer Thompson, this recording is from 3 weeks ago, when Mr. Mitchell first came here to make inappropriate proposals to resolve my alleged rent debt." Mitchell stepped forward, desperate. "Deborah, you're distorting a normal conversation between landlord and tenant." "A normal conversation?" Deborah's voice was icy. "Where did you say that if I was friendlier to you, we could forget about a few months' rent? Where you touched my arm and suggested that women like me need to be creative to get help?" David felt his jaw tighten. Sexual harassment combined with racism and abuse of power. This situation was getting much more serious than a simple rent dispute. "And there's more," Zoe added, looking directly at Mitchell with a disturbing maturity. "Mom taught me to always record when adults talk strangely. So I recorded you talking on the phone with your friends about other tenants too." The terror in Mitchell's eyes was palpable now. "Other tenants?" Deborah nodded slowly. "You know, Mr. Mitchell, when you assumed I was just a sick single mother who would keep quiet, you made a crucial mistake. I know every woman in this neighborhood. And I found that you used the same tactics with at least 6 other families." David pulled out his notepad. "Ms. Williams, would those other families be willing to testify?" "They already have," she replied, pointing to a folder next to the documents. "Written statements, dates, times, witnesses. 15 years working with lawyers taught me the importance of proper documentation." Mitchell was visibly sweating now. This is a conspiracy. You all got together to frame me." Zoe looked at him with an expression that was a mixture of pity and disdain. "Mr. Mitchell, did you really think you could be mean to so many people and no one would notice? Mom always says that bad people always betray themselves." At that moment, David's radio crackled. "Unit 23, your backup has arrived. Detective Rodriguez is on her way." David smiled. Rodriguez was an expert in crimes of a sexual and discriminatory nature. Perfect for this situation. "Mr. Mitchell," David said formally, "I suggest you remain available for questioning. Ms. Williams, this evidence will need to be officially analyzed." Deborah nodded. "Officer Thompson, there's something else you need to know. The recordings Zoe made don't just show harassment. They show Mr. Mitchell discussing illegal collection practices with his associates." Mitchell tried one last desperate gambit. "No one will believe you. A sick woman and a child against a respected businessman." That's when Zoe did something that surprised even her mother. She stood up from the couch, walked over to Mitchell, and looked him straight in the eye. Mr. Mitchell, my grandmother taught me something before she died. She said that when powerful people do wrong, sometimes God sends little people to show them the truth. Her voice was clear and firm, without a trace of fear. You hurt my mom and other moms too. But today that ends. David watched this 8-year-old child confront a grown man with more courage than many veteran police officers displayed. There was something deeply powerful in the moment, as if generations of injustice were being channeled through the determined voice of a brave little girl. As Mitchell instinctively backed away from the intensity of those young but resolute eyes, David realized that he had completely underestimated this family. They weren't victims waiting to be saved, they were strategists who had carefully prepared their own liberation. But when Zoe's cell phone rang with a message, and she looked at the screen with a smile that mixed satisfaction and something that looked like revenge, David realized that the recordings he had heard were just the beginning. What was really on that phone, and what this extraordinary girl had planned, was about to change everything in a way that even he couldn't imagine. The message on Zoe's cell phone was from an unknown number. The press vans have arrived. Operation Social Justice is underway. All families are ready. Zoe showed the message to her mother with a smile that mixed childlike innocence with deep satisfaction. Mom, it's time. Mitchell, who had heard the cell phone beep, tried to get closer to see the screen, but David blocked him immediately. Mr. Mitchell, I suggest you stay where you are. What operation? What is this child talking about? Mitchell's voice was beginning to show real panic. Deborah sat up straight on the couch, and for the first time since David had arrived, a genuine smile lit up her face. Officer Thompson, I need to confess something. Zoe and I didn't just call the police today. At that moment, the sound of cars pulling up outside filled the room. Voices, equipment being set up, and the unmistakable noise of a press crew organizing. What the hell is going on here? Mitchell rushed to the window and his face turned into a mask of absolute terror. There's a Channel 7 van outside. And WTVR. Why are there journalists on my property? Zoe calmly walked to the window and waved at the cameras. Because Mrs. Patricia from Channel 7 is a friend of Mom's from the law firm. And when we told her about you and the other families, she said stories like ours need to be told to everyone. David watched Mitchell crumble in real time. The man who minutes ago had exuded absolute arrogance was now sweating profusely, his hands shaking as he tried to process the magnitude of what was happening. Mrs. Williams, David said, impressed, how many people know about this operation? 17 families in the neighborhood, 3 investigative journalists, 2 civil rights lawyers, and a city councilman who is very interested in housing law reform, Deborah replied with the precision of someone who had planned every detail meticulously. Mitchell turned to her, desperate. Deborah, you don't understand what you're doing. I have connections, expensive lawyers. I can destroy you in court. That's when Zoe did something that surprised even David. She walked over to Mitchell, held her cell phone up high, and pressed play on a recording. Mitchell's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. These black women are all the same. They make a big deal out of nothing. If she had been more cooperative, like Johnson at 85, we wouldn't have these problems. Johnson understood very well how things work around here. The silence that followed was deafening. Mitchell tried to speak, but only a strangled noise came out of his throat. There's more, Zoe said with a calmness frightening for an 8-year-old. Do you want to hear the part where you tell Mr. Rodriguez how to deal with families who don't pay on time? Or would you prefer the recording where you laugh about Mrs. Thompson going a week without power because people like her need to learn their place? Deborah took her daughter's phone and plugged it into a small speaker. Mitchell, for 6 months, Zoe recorded every conversation you had when you came here. Every phone call you made from our yard. Every racist comment. Every veiled threat. The second recording began to play. Mitchell's voice was crystal clear. Frank, I'm telling you, these families are like animals. You squeeze them a little, they submit. The thing is, you can't show weakness. If one gets you, they all will. Mitchell staggered backward, leaning against the wall. How did you get recordings of my private calls? Zoe looked at him with an expression that was a mixture of pity and contempt. Mr. Mitchell, when someone stands in our backyard, yelling into the phone because they think we're too simple to understand, it's not hard to record them. Mom taught me that bad people always give themselves away. At that moment, the front door opened. Detective Rodriguez entered, followed by 2 reporters with cameras, a lawyer in a suit, and to Mitchell's utter horror, Councilwoman Carmen Santos, known for her tireless fight for housing rights. "Mr. Mitchell," the councilwoman said in a voice that cut through the air, "I believe we have a lot to talk about." Mitchell tried one last desperate gambit. "This is a trap. This woman and this child have conspired against me. It's illegal." Detective Rodriguez smiled. "Mr. Mitchell, recording conversations on your own property is perfectly legal. Sexual harassment, racial discrimination, and illegal collection practices, on the other hand," she jangled handcuffs, "those are illegal." Patricia Chun of Channel 7 adjusted her microphone. "Mr. Mitchell, would you like to comment on the accusations from 17 families that you used racist intimidation tactics to extort rent and sexual favors?" Mitchell's face was completely white now. He looked around the room, at David, at Detective Rodriguez, at the cameras, at Deborah and Zoe, and realized he was completely surrounded. I have rights," he stammered. "I want my lawyer." Zoe walked up to him one last time. "Mr. Mitchell, my grandmother always said that when people do really bad things, one day the truth comes out like the sun rising. Today is the day the sun rises for all the families you've hurt." As Detective Rodriguez read Mitchell his rights and led him out of the house in handcuffs, with cameras recording every second, David looked at Deborah and Zoe with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "Ms. Williams," he said respectfully, "you two just executed one of the most precise justice operations I've ever witnessed." Deborah hugged her daughter. "Officer Thompson, 15 years of working with lawyers has taught me that justice sometimes needs a little help. And Zoe has taught me that brave kids can change the world." Through the window, they watched Mitchell being placed in the police car, his reputation, business, and freedom simultaneously crumbling before the cameras broadcasting live to all of Richmond. But as the crowd dispersed and justice ran its course, David couldn't get one fundamental question out of his mind. How had a family that had suffered so much managed to turn their pain into such a complete and inspiring victory? The answer was about to be revealed in a way that would forever change his perspective on courage, planning, and the true meaning of family. 6 months later, David Thompson was walking down Maple Street on a sunny morning when he saw a scene that made him stop and smile. Zoe Williams, now 9 years old, was in the front yard painting a new sign, Legal Support Community Center, founded by Mrs. Deborah Williams. The yellow house had become a meeting place for families facing abusive landlords. Deborah, promoted to legal supervisor at the law firm, used her free afternoons to advise other victims about their rights. "Mr. David." Zoe waved energetically. "Want to see our new meeting room?" Inside the house, David found a completely transformed environment. The room that had witnessed the confrontation with Mitchell now housed a small tenant rights library, computers for legal research, and photos of 17 families who had obtained justice against corrupt landlords. "Zoe has become our little official journalist," Deborah explained, pointing to a board filled with newspaper clippings. "She documents every victory we win and keeps in touch with the families we help." The Mitchell case had become a legal landmark in Richmond. Convicted of sexual harassment, racial discrimination, extortion, and illegal collection practices, he lost all his properties, faced 2 years in prison, and his company went bankrupt. But most devastating to his arrogance were the viral images of his arrest, which became a national symbol of justice against abusive landlords. "The most amazing thing," Deborah continued, "is that other cities have started using our strategy. Vulnerable families are learning how to document and protect themselves legally." Zoe proudly showed a framed letter on the wall. "The mayor said I'm a Richmond youth hero, and I'm getting a medal next month." David read the official letter recognizing Zoe Williams as an example of civic courage. At 9 years old, she had become a speaker at schools, teaching other children about basic rights and how to ask for help when needed. "You know what's most rewarding?" Deborah asked, pouring coffee for David. "Zoe hasn't lost her childlike innocence, but she's gained a social conscience that will guide her forever." Outside, a press van pulled up in front of the house. Patricia Chun from Channel 7 stepped out with a small crew. "They're here for the special interview," Zoe explained excitedly. "It's the 6-month special on our case. It's going to be broadcast statewide." As the crew set up, David watched his wife and daughter review their notes. Two people who could have become permanent victims of the system, but who turned their pain into a transformative force for their entire community. "Mr. David," Zoe said as she smoothed her hair for the camera, Remember when you asked me if I was sure I needed help? I remember it perfectly. Today I understand that it wasn't just about needing help. It was about having the courage to turn our suffering into strength to help other people. The live interview showed not only one family's story of justice, but how that individual courage inspired statewide legislative change. New tenant protection laws, free legal aid programs, and police protocols for housing discrimination cases, all born from the courage of an 8-year-old girl. At the end of the broadcast, Zoe looked directly into the camera. If you're going through something unfair, remember, brave people aren't the ones who don't feel fear. They're the ones who do the right thing even when they're scared. Mitchell, watching from prison, turned off the television in anger. His small, cold cell stood in stark contrast to the yellow house full of life and purpose that he had tried to destroy. David left the house that afternoon with a lesson he would carry with him forever. Sometimes, real social change starts with a brave child willing to run 3 blocks for help. And that the best revenge is not to destroy your opponent, but to build something so beautiful and powerful that their evil becomes irrelevant. If stories of real courage like Zoe's and Deborah's inspire you to believe that ordinary people can change the world, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because when justice and intelligence come together, the results are always extraordinary.